The next logical step would seem to be to get the little Dragon Link receiver working as a control link. Let's not worry about telemetry right now. Let's hook it up control link wise. So on the Sky Hunter, because it's still out on the bench, I just took a 3-conductor normal RC cable where we have black, red, and white, and I hooked it up to the UART on the 765 wing as ground, supply voltage, and ppm. And I just had a 24-inch extension. I ran that out and put a little gender changer on the end of it. And then I started to hook it up to this receiver. And got in the weeds again. It's just, I really try not to say a lot negative right now. Because any picture of this receiver so far I have found claims that with it oriented like this, which I can't find a picture that matches that exactly, that channel 1 is here and running to the left, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7. Well, by working with this today for a while, I've figured out that in truth, this is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8 running left to right with the 2 connectors on the bottom. Now this is a 6-pin connector we'll be talking about next, and this is a 5-pin connector. So I'm going to go ahead and hook this up physically to these 2 pins right here. What I have found to be 7. Now luckily the polarity of everything I could find was correct, and on this board edge is ground, and the center is voltage, and right here on the top is signal. So real quick, I'm going to have to put the phone down and hook this up real quick. So this is what we have over here. We have the receiver oriented so that the 2, I think they call them Molex connectors, I'm not sure. 2 connectors, a 6-pin and a 5-pin down, and I have connected it such that the brown is ground, the red is supply voltage, and the other one, yellowish orangish, is the signal on top. And real quick while we're over here, if I turn on the aircraft, you can see I do have voltage and signal.
Welcome to OpenTX. Throttle warning.
Bink! We have a completely bound working system. The radio transmitter on the back is all very happy right now. Now let me show you what problems I ran into. While I'm right here real quick, I'm going to show you one thing I don't quite understand yet. Now I don't have any beeping out of the transmitter because I have set up the ppm signal in the model. Right there. You can see the external RF is on ppm. I'll show all of these connections. I forgot to do that on the last one where I talked about, last video where I talked about hooking the transmitter into the radio. Things kind of got away from me there when all that went south. So, we have a TX16S putting out a ppm signal. And like I say, I'll show you the connection, but I assure you that wire goes underneath and connects to the JR Bay connector, and wow, I guess the LED shines on the inside. I hadn't seen that before. This could be cool flying at night. Anyway, there's the input 1 connector, ground on the right, voltage in the center, and on the left, that same orange yellowish color, going to ppm, the top pin on that connector. I will show those later. I forgot to do that. I'm just breaking in during video processing to correct some of my stuff. That information on that pin, instructions or downloads, quick start guide. If you scroll down just a little bit where it talks about the quick connection guide to different types of transmitters, this is what the TX16S uses. Inside that JR Bay are 5 pins. You can see that the top one is ppm. That comes right out of the connector that they send with the receiver. This is the JR Bay side of that connector, and I will show it eventually, but I just want to go ahead and hit this right here. Second pin is not used. I think that's can be a TX and an RX. I'm not sure yet. Voltage, ground, and this is telemetry. You might have heard me say in the past that you have to take another wire over from the Dragon Link transmitter to this pin. Total of 4 wires here. That may just be for using the Yahoo type telemetry and the telemetry I've been showing from Crossfire. So there's a little diamond on this connector you see right here that points towards pin 1, and pin 1 is the bottom pin. So put it on exactly like this and you won't have any kind of problem. So I just thought I'd throw that in right here. And I'm going to have to put some extensions on my little handle because the antenna wants to touch the table. Or I may just let it find its own shape. I'm not sure how I'm going to store that antenna anyway. The only other strangeness I have found is when I move the aileron, I get beeps. Not quite sure why yet on that. No other, when I do switches or anything.
OSD3.
Well, there's some pre-programming that's in the TX16S.
Return to home.
But the switches are doing what they should be doing. So,
OSD1.
Don't understand this quite yet. That'd be irritating to fly like that. But let's look at the little, I guess first we'll look at it in Ardu, because I've got a little telemetry radio hooked to the Sky Hunter. It'll be real easy just to look at it in Ardu. Okay, Mission Planner Connect. This will take a second. So, documentation continues just to be a problem. So far, I have not found a good
1 minute.
Oops. That's the flame wheel profile on the radio, and it's going to bitch every 60 seconds about the time because hexacopters don't last long on batteries. I probably should have chose a different one for testing. Anyway, I really haven't found a good picture of the, I guess I can go ahead and go out and let that run in the background. That can take some time. It'll work fine from my purposes. It'll get there. Real quick, I'm going to go out here. We're going to go again to the where you're sent for help. Again, it doesn't matter which of these you click on. You go to the same place. Here, the top one is the only one possible for me. And as far as I've already played with the Wi-Fi, the Bluetooth, I've played with everything but the telemetry, to tell you the truth. I'm just working back through it right now. But right now, we're just trying to do straight up RC connection. Control link. So I'm not interested in really any of the rest of this whatsoever, except for the fact troubleshooting might not be a bad place to touch. I haven't touched it yet, but it's the way men are. They have a gene. They won't use a manual or ask for directions. Whether, as far as the link here, whether you're using 433 or 915, everything I've read says it's just the frequency that's being used. And to me, all the circuitry can be the same except for the local oscillator that sets up the whole thing, probably a timer chip these days. But what would be the local oscillator that starts out in a transmitter? Way down in radio theory, it would just be a piece of quartz crystal. It was called a crystal oscillator. And back when I was a kid, we all had these ink pen type things we carried in our pockets to school in the 6th grade and stuff, that you could actually listen to radio, AM radio, with a crystal radio that fit inside an ink pen. I digress. The thing is the crystal itself, the quartz, was cut. You know, we talk about the wavelength, the frequency, what size the wavelength is. Well, to do a local oscillator, we did that exact same thing with a piece of quartz crystal. And then when we zapped the quartz crystal with electricity, it vibrated. But it vibrated at a resonant frequency that was repeatable. And so we use that to create the frequency that we then amplified, and we turned that into a carrier wave that would actually have power in it and would reach a distance. And then on top of that carrier wave, we put intelligence, or we modulated that carrier wave in some ways. For AM, we modulated amplitude-wise, up and down. For FM, we do it frequency. We slightly change the frequency that it's transmitting at. And of course, you couldn't change the frequency of a hard piece of quartz crystal as a local oscillator. But then as transistors and everything's come along, and today in the digital world, it's done in logic. They've probably gotten past 222 timer chips. So, except for the quartz crystal and the radio change, and the rest of the circuitry stays the same. You're just changing. And then when you have a variable transmitter where you're going to change the frequency it transmits at, you just take that quartz crystal and push it aside in favor of a circuit that you have a potentiometer on or whatever, and you turn it and it changes the frequency of the transmitter. The rest of the transmitter stays exactly the same. So whether this is 433 or 915, everywhere I read says it doesn't matter. And I can see completely why it doesn't matter a bit. On the 915, some of the components might actually be a little bit bigger because it's harder to push 915 than it is to 433. But for most purposes, we can stick with their statement that 433 and 915, just to interchange them on Dragon Link for all the documentation and everything. If you want me to show you where it says that, I can. So this to me says 915 megahertz large 1000 milliwatt receiver, the one that I have, although it looks strange from the get-go because I don't have that many pins, only 8, but it was one of the first places I came. Firmware download here takes me back to that same place we've been. 17 November, 16 July 21 firmware. So we go down through this and we get to the pictures and you go, oh my goodness. Guess let me get a snapshot of what I've got so I can put it up right against this, because this is not the same as what I have in my hand. So I put the picture of my connector down in the bottom right corner. So it doesn't match with this in any shape, form, or fashion. So although mine's a 1000 milliwatt receiver, looks almost like this, that's not it. So come back out here with the, hey, let's check this one out. Well, this looks like it. So up to a point. Now if you look real quick, these are both 5-pin connectors. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and on mine I have a 6-pin connector on this side. Okay, fine. This is the closest I've yet been able to get. In here doesn't show me. This obviously on the right here is not anywhere near the correct. But this does show the signal output on top, the voltage in the center, and the ground towards the board. Thank goodness that turned out to be correct, and I've already shown you that when I powered it up. I didn't blow up my flight controller. What? Never good to put these on backwards, just straight up. Now this says this is channel 1 here, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7. I've found that not to be true. I found mine to be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7 here. So this was the closest I could get. We'll go back. And it starts talking about my Mavlang GPS telemetry. Not much more about connecting. Not much around on connecting this stuff together. These are some nano receivers. This didn't match my. Again, this is not look anywhere near my connector. So I basically went with this and this, although this doesn't match. 5 pins here, not 5 pins. If you look down the right, 6. And like I say, this 1 through 7 in this direction, 1 through 8, this would be 8. The RSI would be 8. I find it to be 1 through 8 this way. So let's look real quick. Is there any place else we can find any information on this at all? This is another place I found that same information. And this picture right here is what finally gave me enough, although it's still not right, to understand the polarity and take a chance. Or else I was going to have to stop again and talk to Dragon Link technical support again. Let me show you real quick.
mission planner right now. Set up. I'm in radio calibration. And if I move the sticks, look at that. I have radio. I can calibrate this radio if I wanted to right now.
Return to home. OSB1.
So,
Transmitter battery low.
oops, running low on my transmitter battery. But there you go. I do have a ppm signal out of my, I'm going to shut down the radio so it'll shut up. I do have a ppm signal out of my radio through the JR port, top pin in the top, going into the cable that was supplied with the Dragon Link transmitter and receiver when I got it. It looks exactly like this one. Has the 3 connectors on one end and the 5 pins on the other end. Came with the transmitter and receiver. I have this end plugged into the transmitter, this end plugged into the JR port. The receiver plugged into the flight controller. You don't have to set up anything in Ardu plane for PPM, S-Bus, or anything like that. And then I'll show you the setup of the receiver and the way I have the pins on it. But I did not find any. I've searched for pictures of the transmitter that are correct. I can't find any. I will try to make one.
So this is what we just saw in the plane. You can see this is connected to 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 if we read right to left, or 2 if we read left to right. So we'll take this off of here, we'll take it over here, and we'll connect it to the computer.
And when we connect it to the computer and bring up the GUI, you can see channel 2 is what I've got set to ppm right here. So this does read left to right, not right to left, pin 1 being out on the left, pin 2 being the next one. That's where I have ppm set up. And this is the way I have it set up inside the Dragon Link software. So that's what I did today. I hate even saying this. I feel like I'm talking out against my own family. The documentation stinks. It's bad. It's bad for everything in drones. FPV. It's been historically bad in electronics, period. I used to work with suite of cash registers when I was a cash register repairman. I spent 3 years driving 300 miles a day to all sorts of stores all around this area, repairing electronic cash registers when I first got out of the military. A lot of those hardware. This was back in I got out in 75. I worked at the federal building for the first 3 years. That'd be 78. So 1979, 80, and 81-ish, I ran around and repaired cash registers. A lot of them were Suitas, etc. They were Japanese made. and the documentation stunk to high heaven because of translation errors. Everything was there at the time, but there were a lot of language translation errors. In computers, in the early 80s, I moved over into tabletop computers when they came out. Started with Tandy. We'll get into that later. Documentation for that was pretty good. Never great. It sort of improved over the years. Got pretty good near my retirement, but when I got into drones, and I did that, got into drones before I retired. This drone documentation, everything to do with drones, quadcopters, RC airplanes, FPV, whatever you want to call this hobby, the documentation stinks to high heaven. And it continues to be bad. All of these things I will never stumble on again. I do these videos hopefully to help you not to stumble to begin with and to never stumble again. The only thing we have to do is get over that first hurdle, that first little time of using a new piece of equipment, and forever after things will be easier. So that finishes up my video today on setting up an RC control link on the Dragon Link 915 transmitter and receiver that I received. And I guess next we're going to have to attack telemetry, aren't we? Oh boy, I wonder what kind of documentation I'm going to find for that. Okay, thank you.